everyone. It's me, your host, Donna, and you're listening to My Lit Podcast. Thanks for joining me today. So, a little bit about what's been happening with me. I have been investing a lot of my time into working out, trying to get stronger and build muscle. I feel pretty stuck in my book still, unfortunately. So, there hasn't been any progress there, but I'll get over this hump, I promise. Like the previous episode, I had reached out to authors, and today's episode is with another contemporary romance author who had amazing feedback and ideas on what I could do to get my book further along and to develop my scenes and all sorts of things. Because unfortunately, when you want to write a book, it isn't just about putting it on paper. You have to invest the time, you have to develop your characters, you have to create a whole world pretty much if it's not a contemporary romance. So, yeah, it's a lot. But I was so grateful Miss Rachel Corsini was willing to speak to me. She has written the romance book entitled Sushi and Sea Lions about a ballerina who has a career-ending injury. So she's going through a lot of, internal issues dealing with something she thought she would do a lot longer than she is able to. And she meets a man, of course, and I think it's pretty much opposites attract. And it's really interesting, and I can't wait to check it out and provide you guys with an awesome review. Rachel was so amazing. Again, she had such great advice. I hope you all take it, and I know I definitely am going to. But yeah, I hope you learn a lot from this episode, and I hope you enjoy. I will put Rachel's Instagram handle in the show notes. And don't forget to like, rate, review, and subscribe to my podcast at Donna's Lit Podcast on your favorite podcast platform or Instagram. If you're interested in romance reviews, you can check out my other podcast where my sister Nick and I provide you all with romance book and movie reviews. Ravish podcast. We have some great episodes coming up. We can't wait to share with you all. All right, let's get into it. Bye. Hello, everyone. It's Donna. Welcome to my Lit podcast. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Miss Rachel Corsini, a contemporary romance author. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited to be here and talk books with you and writing and all of that good stuff. I love doing this stuff.
So, I read your bio.
Okay.
You're a former ballerina. That's incredible
I
discipline and dedication.
a lot for
Yeah.
like many, many, many years. I don't want to say how many years. I mean, I still take class and stuff. It's like one of those things where it's like once a ballerina, you're always kind of ballerina, even if you take a
Yeah.
step back or you take a break. But yeah, it's been and was a very integral part of my life and my upbringing. I
Yeah.
spent many years studying ballet. Yeah.
I mean, it's like part of you, definitely.
Yes.
I know this sounds terrible just from the movies, but I know it's like extremely difficult and you have to train constantly. So that's
Yeah.
kudos to you. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's also a very competitive industry, which is like, because, we're here talking about books. It's a very competitive industry. And there's actually a quote in my book, Sushi and Sea Lions, where Daniela says, there's no good jobs in ballet. Uh, and there is kind of a parallel to that when it comes to books and the publishing industry. There's, I also felt like that also, right? There's no good
Mhm.
jobs in publishing. There's no good jobs in writing a book. I mean, yes, there's like ways to get accolades, but a lot of it is your own internal motivation and like pushing to get the things that you want and the
Yep.
kind of the representation you want or the book deal that you want or figuring out ways to get yourself out there. Like, so again, like I feel like there's like this parallel and it ballet kind of set me up for that. Like it prepared me in a way for the no good jobs in publishing, right?
Right.
Like, all right, yeah, so you wrote a book. So what? There's a million people who also wrote a book. How do
Yeah.
you stand out, right?
Yeah.
So it was very similar in that regard. So I found it to be very helpful.
Well, that's good. You're prepared. That's
I was
awesome.
very prepared. I was prepared.
And I saw, so you published your book obviously last
Yes.
year, Sushi and
Yes.
Sea Lions, and your main character, Daniela, is a ballerina.
Yes. Well, I guess you could say former ballerina. Well,
Oh,
ballerina.
okay.
I mean, like it's one of those things. It's kind of like I said, like it never really leaves you, right?
Yeah.
But in the book, she suffers a career-ending injury at the top of her game, right? Like
Mhm.
she is, um, 30 years old. She's a prima ballerina. She's kind of within that world. She's like famous enough, top billing for ballets, and she suffers a career-ending injury, and it totally changes her entire life.
Yeah.
And so that's the catalyst for the story itself, right?
Yep.
Because every protagonist, like otherwise, in my opinion, there's no story. There
Yep.
has to be something that sends them into the life change,
Yeah.
right? Like there is something that sends them into, okay, well, what is the story? And for Daniela, that is the story. That's the beginning of her story, her losing ballet, that she cannot dance anymore.
Yeah, that it's traumatic, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
Um, and did you, not to be in your business, did you feel like you were pulling from your personal life to put it into the character?
Oh yeah. Daniela is so I'm a huge proponent of write what you know. That's not necessarily saying like every character or every book has to be exceedingly personal. Um, but in my experience, what got me published was the fact that Daniela was a lot of a reflection of myself.
Okay.
Um, she is a deeply personal character, and I used her as therapy to write about all of the things that, like you can ignore for a really, really long time. I never suffered an injury like that took me out of ballet. That was my personal choice at one point when I was a teenager and when I was younger, where I decided this was not something I wanted to pursue anymore.
Hmm.
That was a choice that I made. It wasn't like I was forced out of it. Daniela's forced out of it. But yeah, there is a lot of like traumatic grieving that comes along with that, and Daniela suffers through that. And that's the big thing that she is emotionally moving through is getting over that and trying to find her worth outside of ballet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's huge because, for her, ballet became the one thing for her, the one thing she always wanted, the one thing that
Yeah.
she thought she always needed, and then
Her
it was gone.
identity.
Her
Yeah.
identity, yes, a
Yeah.
big part of her identity, and her entire world was ballet.
Oh, I mean, I am definitely gonna check out your book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet,
That's
but
okay.
I looked it up on Amazon and read some reviews. Great reviews. Everyone loved it, so it's got to be good.
For the most part, there are some, for the most part, I've had pretty favorable reviews. But if you want to like talk about like the review aspect of this whole thing,
Sure.
one of the things that I tried to tell myself is reviews are for readers, they're not for authors, right? It's
Yeah.
not to buff up my ego as an author. That's
Hmm.
not what a review is for. Reviews are to get other people to read the book.
Yeah.
And not everyone is going to, you know, love your characters or feel the way that you do about the story or enjoy it the way that you do or the way someone else does. Or so, like, to me, I really try not to take things personally. I mean, I've had some very few, like I said, but the reviews that are bad, like, are bad. Like, they are
Yeah.
bad reviews. There are things that have been said about the story and that the story, which is interesting, not the writing, which I very much appreciate that, right? So
Right.
I feel like, okay, I'm not like a horrible writer.
Right.
Um, but that have been said about the story that people found problematic, where I was like, okay, that is I see that that's justifiable, right? Like if that's not for you, then it's not for you,
Mhm.
right? If you don't see how the character could do X, Y, and Z after this happening, then that's your personal preference, you know? And so it's like you just let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I feel it's very personal to make a book regardless. It's a huge investment of who you are, and it's terrifying, especially the first book, because I feel like I definitely, like you said, am putting a lot of myself into my main female character because I want it to be relatable to me. And one of the things I have been struggling with is I've created little, not traumas, but pretty much things in the past that would create drama
Right.
for you in the present where you're not necessarily reacting correctly. Like, just things that bother you that maybe shouldn't. And I've struggled with in the scenes where this could be a reaction scene. I'm kind of making the characters too unrelatable where it's like, "Oh, we're good. Everything's great." And they're not use I'm haven't been using that trauma I created to in the present to kind of make it more interesting, and that's been really hard. I've been like too making these people too perfect, and that's been boring. So I'm stuck.
So, for me, especially like when writing this book, I actually at one point like worked with a mentor who helps me like rewrite this. And like one of the things that she told me was, well, it's very clear that this is a personal story, right? Like Daniela is a lot like you and has been through like some similar things. She's not exactly you, but she is you. So she's like, one of the things that we took time to do was when I was working on a major rewrite was journal, um, and get into the emotions of the things that were happening within the story and using that to bring that to the table. I think like it's also a fear, right? Like if I don't make them entirely likable, then no one will like it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not true. You know, there can be likable things about characters and unlikable things about characters, right? Like characters are humanistic. There's a reason why you latch on to certain characters. And so, their reactions to certain things might not be the best reaction. And you have to like let them be authentic and like let that come through in order to show who they are and to propel the story and like move things forward, right? Like,
Hmm.
we know Daniela doesn't have the best reactions to things sometimes, and either did Vincent, right? Like they're human beings. They have their past traumas, they have their past experiences that they're bringing now to something that's new. And there is going to be influence there in the way that they react to things. Um, and you have to figure out how the characters would authentically react, not how it would be easy to digest as a reader,
Yeah. And that's
and let them do it.
one of my so I'm kind of at a wall
Okay.
with writing my book, and I feel like one of my scenes is just not authentic, like you mentioned. Like it doesn't feel like this belongs in the book. I'm like, why did I even write this? Yeah.
Cut it.
Yeah, I'm about to. I have to because it has created like an almost like I don't even want to write right now because I can't go anywhere with what I created. Yeah.
Yeah, when I cut stuff, I don't like just delete it and like totally get rid of it. I
Yeah.
put it into like a document. It's like the graveyard, like the book graveyard.
Hmm.
And sometimes it'll come up somewhere else, or it'll come up in a different story, or it'll show up in a different way, or like a couple lines of dialogue or something, because there is a reason why you decided to write it. You were exploring something. So it's never just totally garbage. It might just not belong
Yeah.
where it is. So it's like you just pull it out and you put it into a different document, and you'll be like, I'll revisit this later. And then maybe it
Hmm.
goes somewhere else, or maybe something that was being said in that moment needs to be used. but not in that exact place. So you can manipulate writing in that way. Um, and that's something I've learned over time too, right? Like
Yeah.
it you have to like give yourself the freedom to be able to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And did so when you're reading, because you're an
Mhm.
avid reader, do
Yes.
you stick to contemporary romance or
Oh
do
no.
you enjoy like everything?
I'm all over. I read everything. I'm all over the gamut. From classics to fantasy to supernatural romance to because I love like stuff like What the Hex and but I also love a good reread of Pride and Prejudice. I'm an English teacher, so I do
Oh,
read and I
okay.
read a lot of short story. I think all of those influences bring something to the table no matter what genre that you're writing in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I think it's important to be well read
Yeah.
as a writer. I think it's important to be well read as a writer. I probably do much less reading now than I've ever done just because I am writing and I work full time and like all this kind of stuff. But not like tuning my own horn, but I'm well read, right? Like I am a high school English teacher. I read a lot of classics. I was an avid binge reader when I was in high school. I mean, I
Yeah.
always had a book on me. It so the amount of material that I've consumed over the course of my life is enormous.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you do have to explore within your own genre. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there are there are beats and things that need to be reflected. If you're going to call your book that genre, there are beats that need to be reflected within your writing. So for me, Sushi and Sea Lions actually leans more towards the women's fiction element of, romance or, chick lit. They don't really call it that anymore, but rom-commy, right? It's more towards women's fiction because it breaks or broke certain requirements for contemporary romance. Like
Oh,
there,
okay.
there are things that Daniela does and that happen within the story that are not widely accepted in a traditional contemporary romance. Like she sleeps with other men. Um, they do not meet each other until I believe it's no, it's about chapter 4,
Mm-hmm.
which is like there's almost like a psych out because she meets a different guy earlier in the book. And they kind of like go on dates. Um, and she meets Vincent at chapter 4. And so that's like you don't do that in a traditional contemporary
Yeah.
romance. It's like you have like the meet cute and then it's about them coming together. And that does not happen for Daniela and Vincent right away. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And they really do not like start kind of coming together until about halfway through the book. So the story itself is not all about Daniela and her love story. So it broke that when contemporary romance. So I actually, you know, when I was querying and trying to have it published, that was one of the issues that I encountered was because it was cross genre. So that was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so you have to sort of determine like if you're writing straight up contemporary romance, then you're going to have those beats
Yep.
within that genre. And if you're not, then you can go a little bit off the beaten path, but you have to understand that, right? Then you're writing probably something more of a women's fiction uh, arena than a contemporary romance. So, and then you would have to query it differently, find the different beats, like things like that. But yeah, so it is important to read within your genre too to see
Yeah.
what is being written.
So my preference for just reading is typically Regency, like my mother. Um,
No.
but my book I chose to write takes place in the late 1800s in America because I felt I'm American. I don't know all the um titles and ways to address.
Hmm.
I don't want to mess that up and be like, this is terrible.
Right, right, right.
But I haven't found a lot of books, like romance books in that era, maybe because I'm looking in the wrong places, but I definitely want to seek some out though, because you're right. Through my research, it's you have to meet certain parameters and like historical romance. I didn't realize until I did my research that like like significantly longer than a contemporary or other types of romance books for it to even be considered. Like it has to be very long. And
Well, what's very long?
well, so what I researched was contemporaries usually around 40 to 50,000 words, while historical romance has to be around 75 to 100,000 plus words. So I wasn't ready for
So
that.
yeah, so word counts, especially as like newer authors,
Yeah.
can be very important, right? Like a women's fiction novel like Sushi and Sea Lions would be between 80 to 100,000 words. Any debut, they are not going to consider you very seriously, probably unless it's like a nonfiction, like heavily researched, like book like
Yeah.
that,
Hmm.
that's sold on proposal. Anything over 100,000 words, and they're going to tell you to either cut it or no,
Yep.
because it's too long and too much of a risk on a new author. Um, so most novels are not considered novels unless they're 50,000 words. So yes, contemporary romance and the like sweet romances and harlequin like stuff like that of a contemporary nature are definitely probably around 50 to 60,000 words. They're
Yep.
shorter. But yes, the historical romances are longer, but I think that's also because you're building the historic
Yeah.
world and
Transporting them. Yeah.
yes, and you're building the world that these characters live in because it's not our own time. Like I don't have to explain how a cell phone works to someone who's reading Sushi and Sea Lions. They know
Yeah.
how a phone works. They know how a text message works, right? Like
Hmm.
this is the time we live in. However, if you're dealing with like, you know, um, coming out balls and debutante balls and
Yeah.
mannerisms and fancy dinner parties, you need to spend time on that because people don't know the etiquette of the time of the day.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that scene is going to take longer than in a regular contemporary novel because
Yeah.
you have to show the customs of the time.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. And that's been a learning curve because I honestly thought I can just write. It's just going to be, I've read enough books. I got this. And it's like, no, not at all.
No. That's actually really funny though. I mean, it's like anybody says, "Oh, I could write that book." Well, go ahead.
Yeah.
Have a seat.
Right. Please show me, master.
Please, please go ahead. I'll check it out. Go ahead.
Right.
But I like that you were kind of like you like put your, money where your mouth is. Like, I want to write that kind of book. And then you started to sit down and write it and you're like, "Oh my, what have I done? Like, what have
Yes.
I done?"
I have been working on this book for a little over 10 years. So,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, sushi did not take me that long. I think maybe like 3 years or so. And that was with like a bunch of revision too, because I was
Yeah.
also figuring myself out as a writer, which
Mhm.
it was for a debut. Like, I mean, I guess that's kind of like the norm of what you do. It's like, what do I write? How do I write? What kind of a voice do I want to have? All this kind of stuff. And then, so the second book is taking around just as long,
Yeah.
but it has not that it has been easier, but it's like I know the voice that I have. So I know that I am a female MC writer, first person point of view.
Oh, okay. I was
Um
going to ask which perspective you write from. That's
yeah,
really hard.
it is hard.
First person.
It is hard. And and the character that I'm working with right now is very different from Daniela. She's like the polar opposite of her, so that's been a real challenge. Um, but yeah, that's how I write. I don't write third person omniscient. I don't write third close. I write first person female MC. But the first versions of Sushi and Sea Lions were actually a dual point of view. So you had Vincent's point of view also. And but that went by the wayside. Like
Oh,
when like I was working with like my mentor and she explained to me, she's like, I don't really think she's like, I don't think this is his story at all. Like it's her story. Like you need to build more on her story. And so I totally went with it. And I was like, oh, this is the voice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you're also like in that way too, like finding your writer voice, which is important. And you know, I think everyone writes at their own pace and they take their own time. And some books take longer, and some books take a shorter amount of time. And it is what it is, you know.
Right. Yeah, I think it's just I just started taking it a lot more seriously recently. So I'm excited. I just didn't ever think it would be as challenging as it is. But
And you also doing historical, like you have to do research. Oh God.
I know. I'm like, this is intimidating. It's so, yeah. I don't know what I was thinking.
Ah, whatever. I've read 700 of them. Everything's
Right?
fine.
I know
Yeah.
everything about that. No. So did you, when you were publishing, I know you were talking about querying, did you use like a small press or how did you get your book published?
So I'm published with a small press called Creative James Media, and I queried traditionally. I went the totally traditional route. Had a query letter. I queried agents. I queried small press publishers. I did the whole thing for months. Like I think I queried Sushi 8 to 9 months or so.
Oh, wow.
Um, over 100, sent out over 100 query letters, maybe close to 200, 100 rejections, around 20 full requests from agents, publishers combined. And then finally, I was offered a contract and I decided to take it. And
Yeah.
that was it. Um, but everyone has a different journey, right? Like you can decide that that's not for you and you want total control. I was not of the total self pub vein. Like that was not something that I wanted to do. I did want to be published through a publisher.
Yeah.
So I am with a small press. That's why you can get my book anywhere. You can order me on Barnes and Noble. I'm on Walmart. I'm all over. Um, but yeah, that was something that I felt very strongly about. And I mean, and it happened. So, there you go.
Yeah. No, I just learned about small press and I was thinking I had to do self-publishing pretty much, but it is very overwhelming when you
Yeah.
start racking up what all the things you have to do. It's not just, okay, let me just hit self-publish in Kindle. Like, no, that is not it.
No, it's a lot. And I don't like, here's the way I feel about this. Like, you never know, you never know unless you try, right? So, I mean, at some point, I think if I would have kept just getting rejected or felt like, okay, like maybe this isn't the route for this book, I may have self-published, right? Because I felt like the story deserved to be out there. So I may have self-published. But you never know unless you try, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you don't query agents, if you don't send the book to somebody, if you don't write the query letter, if you don't put it out there, then you'll never know if you could be traditionally published. You don't know if an agent will pick you up and you could end up published at a big four and like all over the place. So you don't know unless you put it out there. But again, talking about the correlation between like ballet and publishing, I got told no a lot, a lot. It was no, this isn't for me. Um, I would send a full request and then still get rejected. I and then sometimes you get an explanation and sometimes you don't. It you have to have a little bit of a thick skin. Like
Yeah.
you can't just be like, oh my God, they like the one person told me no and it's horrible and I'm never sending it out and whatever. And all of a sudden you're chucking the manuscript into the fire. It's almost in the same vein as like reader reviews, right? Like one agent could absolutely love your book and be your champion and be like, yes, we're going to get this published. And then another one could be like, this is total trash.
Like, please
You know,
stop writing, please.
yes. So again, you know, you have to weigh that and that experience. Like what, and also, what can you personally handle? There are some people who cannot handle the querying process or being rejected like that. And so that's why they have just circumvented all of it and we're like, you know what? I'm just going to self pub.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And that is totally fine because some people know that they're not built for that at all. Because it can really crush your soul.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's very difficult to like check your email and get, in your inbox about a story that you really care about, that you worked really hard on. No, this isn't for me. No, thank you. This is why I'm rejecting this manuscript, et cetera, et cetera. One, two, three, like one after another, after another, after another. And it can really, really get to you.
Yeah, because this is, you on the paper pretty much, and a lot of time goes into it. I
Yeah.
have small kids, and it's like anytime I get to write, I cherish that time to invest it. But it's hard because I have to get back in the mindset of the story and my
Yes.
characters. But yeah, it would be hard, but I know I am kind of like okay with rejection because it's an expected thing. I know a lot of writers I've listened to podcasts about or
Yeah.
um like done research on, they say, be expecting no a lot, but all it takes is one yes, pretty much. Like in your case, that's awesome. I'm sure you had more
Yeah.
offers, but that's awesome that you got that opportunity.
And like if you do like decide, one of the things that I found that helped me was I would do batches of queries, right?
Hmm.
So if I found that I was getting beaten down by the no, 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 I stopped for a while.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, maybe I need a little pause. And I would stop for like a month or a couple of weeks. And then I'd be like, okay, it's time to send some more. It's time to send some more. It's time to send some more. And that also very much helped. Like,
That's good.
just because you're querying doesn't mean you have to I am querying and I just need to send and send and send and send.
Yeah.
No, no, no.
Beat
First
the
of all,
dead
you're
horse.
right. First of all, your book's not going anywhere. It's finished.
Yeah.
So, whether it gets accepted during the year that you finish writing it or in the following year or whatever else it is, it doesn't matter. The manuscript is done.
Yeah.
So you could start writing something else while you're querying and you could do whatever it is that you want. So, you know, I think you have to do what's best for you as the writer that you are and also the person that you are, right? Like if you're really starting like where it's really affecting like your life, then you take a break. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't like people make it like their job. Like I have to do it now. I'm like, no, you don't. Like
Yeah.
you don't. Like it's okay. It's okay. Right.
Yeah.
And chances are, like, even if when you get back into the trenches, the agent that you wanted to query is close to queries, chances are they'll be open again. Put
Yeah.
them on your list, keep checking their page, like keep whatever it is that you need to do, right? It's not, you don't have to just make it all or nothing ever. That's the way
Yeah.
I feel personally. It's all a process.
And so kind of switching gears a little bit to how you were getting to your like resolution of the story, did
Yeah.
you plan you like did you like you said you journaled, but did you plan out how you were going to get to that point, or you knew what you wanted your ending to be, or was it kind of like it just developed into that as you wrote?
Oh, oh God. I'm trying to think now. Did I know the end? Actually, actually, it really wasn't supposed to be a romance. She was supposed to end up alone.
Oh.
Yes. She was supposed to end up alone. And then as I was writing and writing them, I was like, oh no. I was like, no, she can't end up alone. I was like, she can't. Like the whole thing is that I don't want to like give too much away in case like
Yeah.
anybody wants to read it, but clearly there is a major romance element. And if you know anything about romance, it's happily ever after, right? Or happily for now.
Hmm.
So that's not giving anything away. But the original end of my story was very, very different. Daniela was supposed to end up alone and standing on her own 2 feet, and she was okay with that
Yeah.
after this amazing love story. And then I looked at it and I went, no, she can't. She can't end up alone. And then I was like, but the big thing for me was the resolution of that relationship and how they came back together had to be on her terms.
Mhm.
She had to take, she had to have her own advocacy and she made the decision, not him. He, yes, it was clear that he, because we know about the third act breakups and like all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Anyway, he had put forth into motion, yes, I love you, I'm sorry, and I want to be with you, but ultimately it was her decision. And I knew like a very small portion of how that looked. I mean, the scene, I seen the moment like in my brain,
Yeah.
like in my head. I was like, okay, this is the moment. And this is what happens when they come back together. Um, did I know exactly how it got there? No, it didn't.
It's
Because again,
hard.
she was supposed to end up alone. So that changed everything. I was like, oh crap. Ah, I was like,
Yeah.
how dare you? I was like, how dare you get a soulmate, you idiot?
I know, right? That's awesome though. Yeah, it's like such a journey.
It's a journey.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's awesome though.
But I do feel very strongly anything with like romance or it's like being considered a romance, I will stand on this argument. I don't understand why this is even an argument in the community. A romance ends with a happily ever after or a happily for now. That's why people read romance. So that's why my book straddles women's fiction and contemporary romance, because it has the internal character development required of a women's fiction novel, but the happily ever after of a romance.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I
So
definitely have thought about like, what if I do a cliffhanger? What if I did? And it's like, nobody wants that. That would make me angry.
you'd be like, no,
Yeah. Like, I
why?
hate this
I mean, I
book.
mean, you could, but with like a happily for now, right? But there's like some other kind of where you're going to see them again
Yeah.
because there's some other kind of turmoil happening in the
In the
story.
background. Yeah.
Right. But there is the happily for now. But they will have more to the story, right? Like that I
Mhm.
feel is very important that your readers know that no matter what, there will be some kind of happy resolution. Like there
Yeah.
will be something right. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And I feel like it's kind of like a cop out. Like, oh, I can just stop here. Okay.
No, no, you can't. No, you can't. That's evil. Yeah, no, you can't do
No,
that.
it is. It is. It is. I know. It's lazy.
I mean, some authors do it. I mean, some big name authors do it, and then people buy the next book.
Oh,
So,
yeah. We're eating it up over here.
yeah, yeah,
That's
absolutely.
yeah. Well, I went to your website that
Okay.
you sent me,
Yes.
rachelcorsini.com,
Yes.
and I read your description of yourself, which is a women's fiction, or you write women's fiction with a side of humor, heart. Wait, with a side, I'm sorry, I wrote this down and I can't read.
That's okay.
Women's fiction with a side of humor, heart, and a side of hot mess. And I feel like, hello, that's me.
Yes. Are you a millennial?
89. Okay.
Welcome. Yes. So, I 100% adhere to the hot mess, but I'm big on like I don't know if this is messed up or not, but like finding humor in like the disaster. Like Daniela is, even though she's going through a lot of things, she's still very lighthearted and it's still very funny. The way she views what's happening to her and how she's like currently moving through life. And I feel like if you can't find humor sometimes in the sadness or in your struggle, then I mean, it's very devastating. And
Hmm.
so the hot mess, like I joke that like Danielle is the hot mess express, and most of my characters are a hot mess express, but they are endearing hot mess expresses. We've
Yeah.
all been there, right? Like, um, there is a moment in, so like for instance, right? She's still a disaster, but there's like a moment in the story. Her and Vincent, they're not together yet, but
Yeah.
there's stuff. They are out for her best friend's birthday, and and they are like a kid. He can't dance. So he can
Oh
slow dance, but
no.
he can't like, grind it up. So she's a little tipsy and they're like dancing. And then he does something and she does one of these and she's like, ah! Like throws her hands up and she goes, shots. And he's like, what? And she like just, and then obviously they're stumbling out of this club
Yeah.
drunk. And he's like, all right, like, let's get you home. Like, I mean, he's very protective. I mean, he's the quintessential guy. Like, he's a guy.
Yeah.
And she's like, I get myself home by myself all the time.
Oh
And
no.
he's like, all the time. And then he's like looking down at her and she's like, oh, you have dimples. And she's like, what am I doing? And her internal mom. So it's a mess, but it's very funny. And he's
That's
like,
cute.
I know you can get yourself home, but we're gonna go home together because I'm worried about you. And she's like, oh, look at your little dimples. And her internal monologue is going, oh my God, Daniela, please, you have to stop. You have to stop. And it's so like the things like that, like the funny, and her mostly it's like the internal stuff while she's
Mhm.
struggling through her coming to terms with her injury and the ballet and the losing the guy that she always thought was the guy. And there's so many things. And she just laughs at herself. And I
Yeah.
think that's where the humor and the hot mess and stuff come from. And I know that that's not for everybody. Like some people might be like, "What is wrong with this person?"
Oh,
Like,
no,
what?
I feel like I won't confirm, but I won't also deny that that may have happened to Donna once upon a time a decade ago.
Thank you. Right? We've all
Yeah,
been there.
yeah,
I mean, um, finally getting rid of a guy who was really, really bad for you, and she feels really bad, and so she goes out to buy liquor and a Twix bar,
there you
and
go.
Vinny's in the deli buying condoms, and it
Perfect.
because they live very close to each other. So it's like forced proximity a little bit.
Yeah,
And so, you know, they have that moment there and it's funny. And he's walking home with her and she jams her foot in the door and she's like, oh, and he's like, and he's got to carry her because now she's limp. It's that kind of a thing. And she's like, of course I'm the damsel in distress right now. Of course I am. Right. While
mhm.
he's trying to go home to screw his girlfriend. And here I am, right. Being needing to be rescued. And
That's
it's like
funny.
the whole thing. Um, and but I think those moments they're real and they're important and you got to go with it. Like you got to laugh sometimes at your own misfortune. Otherwise, life becomes a little bleak. And
Yeah, definitely, very bleak.
yes, yeah. I mean, it's so, and I think that also makes things more authentic too, right?
Definitely, because it's not like, "La, la, la, we're just gonna go and everything's perfect and
Right,
everything's perfect timing," and
right.
yeah, no, definitely, that's awesome.
Yes.
And as you, wrote Hot Mess and were describing Daniela, I saw your quote from your book on your website, and it made me laugh when I read it.
Oh,
It
which
says,
one is
"Maybe I was a writer after all, the next Elizabeth Gilbert, but instead of eat, pray, love, it would be collapse, cry, and overcome."
it? Yes.
100% been there, done that, girlfriend.
And I think that's like Danny's motto. And that's Danny saying that, right? Like that's Daniela saying that about herself. She's at that point in the story, she's writing an entrance essay to get into grad school because she's going back to
Oh.
school. And it's like one of the prompts, they make you do those stupid prompts. One of the prompts is like, describe a time in your life where you overcame something, like
Yeah.
whatever it is. And so that's the essay that she's writing. And so that's the musing that she has about this, right? Instead of eat, pray, love, it's collapse, cry, overcome because of what had happened, everything that had happened.
Yep.
And that's her personality that quote describes her personality 100%. The sarcastic humor and the, I'm not going to just wallow forever. Like I can't wallow forever
Yeah.
and, moving forward, but finding joy in it. Hope trying to find joy in it.
No, definitely. It really sounds like an awesome book. I am going
Oh,
to read it, I promise. It
yay.
look like I don't typically read contemporary, but you're like the humor aspect, and it's not just like a text message exchange or whatever. Like it sounds very, very interesting, especially with, I love strong women leads who, yeah, life isn't perfect out here and we do things we might not be proud of when we're, going through emotional things, trying to grow as a person. And I think it's very relatable and I really want to read it.
Oh, thank you. So one of the things like I did kind of struggle with too was like after I finished, I took stock of Danny and I was like, I hope that women who read it or anyone who reads it does see her as a strong female character, but she's not your typical, I guess like maybe I guess trend wise or whatever that would be seen as the strong female character. Like she is not overly forceful or
Yeah.
she is not argumentative or she is not, you know, it's not glaringly obvious her strength. It's like it's almost like a quiet strength and it builds over the course of the book. She
Yeah.
gets stronger as the story goes, and that's a part of the development that I created for her was her coming into her own
Hmm.
and finding happiness with herself, love of herself, and becoming like the woman that, she really could be. And that doesn't necessarily mean that she's looking to be loud or yell or argumentative or,
Yeah.
waving a pitchfork around. That's not her. But there is strength in that. And so that was really important to me. But other characters are different. They're going to show their strength in different ways. And so I do hope that people take that away from Daniela, that she is strong. It's just different. It's a different strength.
Yeah, because I don't normally like when authors make their female lead like have a chip on her shoulder or super tough and has to prove herself, like because I don't like people like that in real life.
Right. Right.
They're annoying to me. And we don't have anything to prove. Like I tell that to people at my job, like I don't have to prove anything to you. My work speaks for itself. Like I don't
Yep.
owe you an explanation or anything. And I enjoy characters who are the more quiet, resilient strength, not in your face. I'm tough. Like, don't mess with
Right.
me.
Right. I mean, there are moments where Daniela sticks up for herself
Of
and
course, yeah.
with, and but she's words and she's smart. So it's like witty and
Yeah.
it's like she'll like give you that jab and you're like, ooh, okay, and so, but that to me is strength, right?
Yeah.
Because it's also exercising restraint. Like
Yeah.
instead of starting a full out argument with somebody, she'll pass one comment and it's enough. And it is enough.
Hmm.
And, you know, but like you said, that chip on your shoulder, she could, after the things that, like, with the start of the book and like where she is, like, she could have started with this huge chip on her shoulder and like having to break it down, but she doesn't.
Yeah.
She's very open and she's got an open heart and she loves fiercely and she's funny and lighthearted and prancing her way through life and you know Vinny's the grumpy one.
Really? I would have expected him to be grumpy.
Oh,
That's
he's
funny.
grumpy. He's
That's
grumpy.
funny.
Yeah, he's the grumpy one. He is, so in like the grumpy sunshine like aspect of them, she's sunshine, he's grumpy. Yeah. He's like not like the little ball of energy. He's more logical. He's more like, you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. He's
That's
also, there are things that he's going through in his life. But yes, that's how he is. Like there's another point where she jokes around about him that he, like the one word grunting,
Yep.
he's very he's a guy, not very emotional. He, whatever. But it's very, very funny because they are like polar opposites in that respect.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, he starts talking more. Obviously, as they get together, he talks more.
That's good. That is necessary.
But it is funny, and I didn't realize, like, even when I was writing him, um, that he is weirdly enough somewhat like Darcy esque. Like,
Oh, wow.
yes. So if you're when you're reading it, when you ever you get a chance and you want to reach out, let me know. Did he come across as Darcy esque? Because after when I looked back at it, I said, oh my god. I said, oh my, what have I done? But they don't. But the difference is they don't ever hate each other. They're not enemies. They're
Yeah.
never enemies to lovers. They don't ever hate each other.
Mhm.
Right? If anything, it's like the polar opposite. Yeah. Because she's always had a crush. And yeah. So it's the polar opposite of that, but he is a little Darcy-esque. He's very reserved. He's more calm than she is. He's like, they're opposites. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I love Pride and Prejudice, so I definitely will probably enjoy his character because I love that romance story. Like, I used to
Oh,
watch the Keira Knightley one in high school, like, all the time.
my favorite. It's my favorite Jane Austen is Pride and Prejudice. I'm convinced she's the original romance writer. No one can change my mind. Without any smut, she managed to melt women
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, seriously, it was so you could feel the love without, like, the fun
Yep.
stuff, I guess, but it
And
was
they're
really great.
they're all romances. They all end with a happily ever after. Every single one.
Yep, yep.
Yep.
She's the goat.
She's the goat. Yes.
All right, Rachel. Well, I just want to tell you thank you so much for your time today. I had a great time getting to know you and learn about your method as an author. And I'm definitely going to apply your advice because I needed it.
Yay. Oh, that makes me feel so good. And like you just have like again, I'm very big proponent of like you have to see what works for you. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know I do things as a writer that other people would be like, how do you write like that? I write non I don't write chronologically
Oh,
and I piece things back together.
oh, like a quilt.
Yeah.
Dang.
Sometimes it's very good. Sometimes it's very, very bad.
You're like, I don't know
But
where this is going.
right. But it's like I write where it's like I see that I see this between them. I have to write it down, whether it's the beginning, the middle, the end, a quarter of the way through, happening now, not happening now. And then I move things around and I link everything together. That works for me. That might not work for you. And I know
Yeah.
some people that they have to write a story like it's actually playing out. They have to write it from beginning to end. I don't write like that. Like my next book, I know how it ends and I've written the ending already. The
Oh,
rest of it is
wow.
not done. The end is done. Right.
That's interesting.
The
I never
traumatic.
thought to even try that. So that's an idea,
Yeah.
definitely.
The third,
Because,
like my third act breakup in the second book is already written. Are they even close to being there yet? No, but I know how they break up.
yeah, that's really
Yes.
interesting. I think I might try that because I am like stuck.
Yeah. That's how I am. Like, skip it. If I
Yeah,
get
that makes
stuck,
sense.
if I get stuck and I see something else, I skip it and I write whatever and then I come back and I fix it later.
That
That's
makes,
what I do.
yeah, that's a really good like method. I like that because then
Try
it
it.
prevents you from maybe how I've been just allowing myself to stay stuck. I can explore that and get to that
Mm-hmm.
point. Maybe that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Or
That's
you
really
work backwards. I know some people work backwards. Some people, front to end work backwards, or they do what I do. They're all over the place and they plop things in and out and they change things. You that's also a big part of doing this,
yeah.
right? It's figuring out how you best get through your draft.
Yeah,
And then
definitely.
and I edit totally different than that. I edit from front to end.
Oh, okay.
So I piece everything all together after I've written non chronologically in the midst of all this the chaos, and I put everything together. I figure it all out, and then I do a major rewrite or an edit from start to finish, from one end to the next, and then it goes to like betas and stuff like that, and I get feedback, and I do another cycle.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
That's interesting.
That's what I
Dang,
do. Yeah.
that's
Because if
cool.
some things are too short, or if stuff is revealed too soon or has repeated itself or whatever, I want to see that first.
Yeah.
And I'll extend a scene, or I'll cut something down, or I'll change maybe the dialogue because that whatever for whatever reason that still needs to be there, but this needs to wait and to be said here, and I'll cut it and I'll move it, stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
it's like a
lot.
puzzle.
It's a
The
lot.
puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah, a draft, to me a draft is like a puzzle.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's
And then
awesome.
I do like a big edit. That's what I do. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that
You're
tip
welcome.
too, because
You're welcome.
I needed like advice on how to get out of this hole.
The void, the writing void is a real thing. It's
Yeah,
definitely a thing. My book too is a void. It's okay. We'll get through
I'll pray for you.
it. I know.
Well, I hope you have an awesome St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, you too.
Thank you. And I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday.
Oh, you too. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday and just pick a scene and start writing.
I will. I will. Thank you. Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.